Hey, here we are. Go live, July 2021, the year that we all thought would fix everything, but maybe not. Anyway, uh, just before going live, we were talking about, look at this group. Are we past our expiry date? Best use before date? That's an excellent question, and I always wonder, like, I'm always looking for who's the new guard. Who are they? Are they out there? They have to be, right? I don't know. I think that kind of goes back to the question I always ask about community. And there are people who are doing Mac administration and programming and all this stuff, and they just don't know about this community. And how do you let them know about it? And it's like, I don't know, you take out billboard ads or something and let people know about it, because I've definitely now started through, new lines of work, meeting people who are adminning Macs, and they're doing a pretty kick-ass job. And, they're not here. They're not part of MacAdmins, and they're not attending conferences, or, at least the ones that I go to. And I try to encourage them to do all those things, but, they got work to do.
But I thought this was a AA meeting and a MacAdmin monthly meeting.
It's all those things rolled into one, but like, I'm always willing to hear about how we connect with the new guard.
I would consider it's hard to run into the people in the same way as we used to know it. Even job wise, I think. With a new customer, you always get to face new people. And we as a consultancy, of course, we have some new customers as well as people we already know. And it's good that this is happening, but still, if you're on a WebEx or a Teams call, it's totally different to get to know each other, also on this business relationship angle. So how should we find those people that are out there doing great stuff and are much younger? So the virtual meetups are, the shy person is not acting up. It's just they may write something down or just make their notes, but how should you get in contact with them if they're not like proactively doing some stuff? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult problem. Ages ago, I used to advertise this on meetup.com, and I didn't, that made almost no difference. So I wound up dropping that, and we stick with mailing lists and Twitter, and I don't know, maybe I should talk to the Slack admins on MacAdmin, and maybe we get to drop a note in general or something, just letting people know. Anyway, it's a tough problem. I thought the problem used to be getting to Windows admins that were thrown into the deep end of the pool on hey, we have a bunch of Macs now, you're in charge. How do we get them information? But I think it's also evolved into how do we reach other Mac admins that are just not connected with it?
I think there's a lot of different tribes. I mean, ever since I heard about Reddit, I hated it. But, it's a community, it's a tribe. People have different communities. People love hanging out in, Twitter, or, I heard about Twitter from Eric. I heard about, people hear about different communities. And I think it works for them. People really like, those different places to get information. So, I get all my information from Jamf ads, but
I'm so sorry. Anyway, all right. Well, enough with that impromptu. Let's dive right in. This year we have, and I'm going to butcher your name, Henry Stammer Johan.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh,
that's
all right.
Perfect.
All right. From Zentral Pro Services. So you kick us off. Tell us all about yourself and who you are and what you do.
Okay, so I think I'm into the Mac admin space, coming from the audio and video branch. back then. So in my hometown, two of the audio vendors, Steinberg and eMagic, that got acquired by Apple, are based here. So there's always a great resource of people in that space. And I entered into this as a teenager, and from there on, I had to handle the precious audio cards that were very expensive, early Pro Tools systems on the new bus. And so over time, I got my hands onto servers and trying to do the imaging correctly and using the scripted tools that were available, and finding some blog posts from you and others, and then got in touch with more people. So from there on, I was always working in this angle. And besides all of that, I was also involved in a team of people who ran a club. So IT was not my only business, but nowadays, given the situation that the clubs are no longer a proper business, so I was lucky to have not only one opportunity to work, but different kinds of work. So, and this is how I ended up in the MacAdmin community, basically.
Well, clubs need IT work as well, right?
Yeah. So I was the go-to person, when the artists came up with Ableton on stage and they had some problems, troubleshoot before, the sound check. So this was my role as well. But however, I don't know how the club scene is running right now anymore. A few club friends of mine are still, doing work in this angle, but everything has shifted. And yes, I was lucky to join very early on the MacSysAdmin conference. And so this is where I would say I got exposed the most to many of you. And then a bit later on, I traveled to conferences in UK and US, and made more of you people.
Mac DevOps being one of those conferences.
Yeah, definitely.
Vancouver, Canada /USA.
Yeah. So yeah, I know I've met you there. I've met you at MacSysAdmin, but I guess fast forward to 6-ish years ago.
Yeah.
Starting up Zentral. So let's talk about that, because that's.
So the idea of Zentral was pretty simple, because I was a partner of a company that is an MSP for Jamf, and we did Jumpstarts, and OS Query was just released. And so there was this, how can we leverage OS Query next to the Jamf inventory? And so this was when I had a coffee with my today's company partner, Eric Falconier. And so he's a Java developer for almost more than 20 years, and he's a brilliant person. And he was like, I can look into this. And then I think 2 days later, it's like, this could work. And so over that summer, preparing another talk for the MacSysAdmin at this time. So it manifested, so this can be a project. And I reached out to a few people to just privately to get some feedback. And even I think back then I contacted Alistair, and he was like, this is good, but have you considered this and that? And all of this early feedback went into that when we presented Zentral as a one more thing at the MacSysAdmin, it was already an OS Query and a Santa server, and building on the Elastic Stack. And this is what is still part of what is Zentral today. But overall, it's a framework that you can use in helping that the inventory and the other sensors or parts can be getting organized much closer together. So I would say each implementation with a customer may vary. So I'm very lucky that we did a Monkey integration, not only about the Monkey inventory, but also managing Monkey manifests. And we presented that a few years later at MacDevOps YVR. This was a private module back then. And then it didn't make sense to just like hold it back because it was not a big secret, but we didn't have the intention to support it. So it was in a public code base, but not used by anyone. And when we founded the Central Pro Services company, so as a pure consultancy, no MSP work anymore, that monkey module, which is called Monolith, was idling and not used. But then we got in contact with a friend, and he's working at a customer, and so and they had the intention to use this to just replace what they had to organize Monkey before. And so this was a just starting work on that again. And for us right now, it's the thing that the business need formerly in my old company was defined because we have been an MSP. And so this was what was baked into Central. But now, as a consultancy, we need to learn about the business cases that an organization has and adapt to that. So I think that's the big difference of the first 4 years with Central and the last 2 years since we founded the Central Pro Services company.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. For people who might not have heard of Central at this point, what's the 30-second overview? Like, what's your elevator pitch? Someone asks you, "Oh, you Central, what's that?"
So we're organizing OS Query and Santa next to the inventory and the systems you already have, and help you to see the events in the data store that you want to end them up with.
Great. And then the other thing I picked up on is when you started describing the start of Central up through where you are now, the first thing you mentioned was OS Query. But when I think of Central, and I think as I talk to other people about it, they're after Central for the Santa server. The Santa Sync server. For OS Query, there are a good number of choices out there if you want to scoop up OS Query data, particularly Fleet, which is very good at what it does. I think Central I see as a first-class Santa server, and I want to say it's the only open source solution left, unless I'm missing one. Like Upvote is done, right? Upvote has just rotted away. At least the public repo has just sort of bit rot over time, where it's not in a usable state. You have Victor's Moreau's server, which I think even Victor says go use Central. Right? Like I see some nodding there. And is there another one that I'm missing? I don't think there is one.
I just wish the North Pole name was available.
Yeah.
Fleetsmith.
Yeah, Fleetsmith does it in a different way. So they unpack the database, and then they add what you use in the Fleetsmith interface to add your chars and define your rules, and then it just restores that into the database. That's the native Santa integration that Fleetsmith has, as far as I understood. But they support also Moros, and they support, of course, Upvote. And so, short before Fleetsmith got acquired, we reached out for them. Just can you do one addition, one change, because it's about the URL and the endpoint. But the Apple acquisition didn't make this easy. So I was just going to say, yes, I knew of Fleetsmith, and I love Fleetsmith. I think they did an amazing job. But I did start off by saying open source, which Fleetsmith never was open source. And now that they got acquired, I don't think you can become a new customer of Fleetsmith. Is that correct? You can, they grandfather. I see some nods. So I think with Fleetsmith,
if you were a Fleetsmith customer, you're still being supported, but no new customers. So as far as I'm concerned, that option's kind of off the table. So so anyway, I think the point I'm trying to make is like Zentral is the only open source Santa server worth considering at this point.
Yeah, so as the reason I mentioned OS Query the first was back then there was, I think, only one other project looking at OS Query 6 years ago. And of course, from there on, the ecosystem has matured, and there have been projects that have been actively developed, like was it Doorman, and then they are stalling. So of course, in the OS Query space, there's much more choices you have. But yeah, and the Santa integration, when we publicly announced that the Central as a project, so we presented both, and of course, we kept on the Santa as well as the OS Query side, and yeah, but definitely we get much more requests on the Santa integration that we have, and we overhauled the how we manage Santa in the beginning of this year. So this is quite a nice addition, and also shows the direction we're going with the overall Central.
Yeah, and yes, that was another great Mac DevOps presentation.
Yeah. Was it about a month ago? I don't know, even know.
Yeah. Month and a half.
Yeah, 6 weeks, something like that.
So then, yeah, the other thing I said there a bunch was open source. So Central is open source. You can, there are some all-in-one images. You can download the source code, run it yourself, which is pretty exciting, right?
I hope so. Of course, what we sometimes see is that the people are, for example, say, I want to check out Santa. And so then they start with the Docker Compose, and then they have to deal with the TLS and Docker Compose. And this is all manageable. But when they want to start checking out Santa management, so for that purpose, for the quick evaluation, we have created the all-in-one images, I think, many years ago, and we maintain them. We also write some tools that they are easily to upgrade to the latest state. So, but the strategy for customers, that even the larger customers, is that we help them to build their own images and tie this much closer to the cloud native services. And so there we share private libraries with the customers. We develop some additional stuff with the customers. And then it's up to the customer what they decide on. Even the open source idea is there as well, because we share what we have, and as long as their customer relationship, they get access to that content. It's not publicly available to everybody, but yeah. So, but the base idea is the same.
Yeah. So let's dig into that. Zentral Pro services. You keep saying customer, customer, customer. Tell us a little bit about that. What type of services do you offer? So this is paying services from customers that help, in some ways, help fund the open source project.
Yeah.
And it helps put food on your table and fund, drinks or something. But like, this is how you're making money, right? This is your job.
Yeah, but only partly what we take care about the Central open source. So we have a few core pillars here. So that one is that we review advice on existing setups on managing Macs. So that maybe without OS Query, without Santa, without Central involved, and help those customers to improve what they have and bring them to that next desired level. And then we, of course, take care about the implementation of Central and do customer-specific adaptations and improvements. And then we also have some further software that we develop, which is based on identity and platform security and automation. So, and not all of that is visible, but this is what, let's say, the core services that we offer to customers. We also are working as Jamf integrators still. So this is, let's say, a totally different area, because sometimes everything we know from the open source customer, it does not apply for those cases. But on the other hand, we see many bottlenecks, and we have a greater vision, unless we would only focus on the open source stack that we maintain. So.
And what do you, if you can talk about it, like what would you say is a typical engagement for a customer? Just simply getting Zentral up and running, or is it usually a bigger project than that even?
So I would say it's usually a bigger project. So we rarely have this like, oh, we help them to understand the early things and then leave them alone. And so it's more the larger organizations that consider, okay, we need a solution, and we help them with the integration, and we translate what we have towards their internal teams. And so this is related to the structure of that customer and how the team structure is. Sometimes, let's say, something that could be easy for us to deliver within a week extends over months, because a project within many other projects at a customer's has its own cadence. And so therefore we can run some projects in parallel. And in between we have some long-standing relationships that we are just every year when the new macOS release is coming, so they get us in for some more or less adopting what they have. So, and this let's say the bread and butter work we also do that helps us to also lean back a little bit and not be depending on driving Zentral as a product and squeezing out the maximum that is possible, and offering, we don't do heavy advertisement. So it's more that the people come to us because they look for a solution and look for that knowledge we have.
That's a good question, but I just want to make sure I open it up to anyone else who might have some questions before I keep steamrolling along.
What question you refer to? The one in the chat?
No. Oh, did someone add something?
Yeah.
Did I miss?
I think Matt has something in the chat, like about the Trail of Bits Sinter, which is the.
Oh yeah. So, why am I not seeing it? But if the question is about supporting Sinter over Santa, is that the question, Matt? You're here. You can just ask.
Oh yeah, I'm just listening to you. I'm using my ears and listening to you. It wasn't a question. You were talking about open source Santa, and I just said, there's also the Trail of Bits Sinter project. So I just thought that was interesting. I love listening to Henry talk. So let him talk forever. It's good, he helped me set up Zentral, the first version, I think, and then I really want to set up the newest, latest version. So I need to talk to Henry. But yeah, I think it combines all the awesome elements. Santa, NoSQL query, and getting all your monkey data and other datas. So there's a lot of great things in there.
But I like to have more the dialogue of the people involved here. So I think, Alistair, as you're in the call,
is he awake?
Yeah, I think so. So do you still recall, the first contact that we had? I think it was during the MacSysAdmin.
I remember I evaluated Collide when it was a bundle of Node. It was amazing. Yeah. It had psychedelic colors. It was more of a screensaver than it was an OS query server. I think I tried Doorman and was immediately around the door and kind of like in fear and shock that it was going to eat me. I think that I couldn't get too many OS query fleet servers going at the time. But I mean, you're completely underselling yourself in Central Pro Services. That you're like an R&D wing for most of Europe. Like, and Central Pro Services gets to have so much fun. Like, it's a great time. But like the first time I used Central, it was the only OS query server I could get to do something. I could get to actually give me responses from queries and things like that. So that definitely set it apart when I was giving early presentations around OS query.
Yeah, I recall that you've been on stage on the Mac DevOps YVR back then. Yeah, so the R&D wing, that's definitely something that we do, which sometimes is not visible outside, that we have some problems or problem cases, and we work on a solution, which always is the problem. If you open source it, then you somehow are having to, or you own the burden of supporting it to everybody who wants to understand it. And this is sometimes the reason we refrain from open sourcing it directly. But towards the customer that is using that, we always tell them we could open source it every day because we may need this as a part of another module that we do in our Central project. And I would say a lot of the traces of R&D you can see in the Central code base. Many of that is quite more hidden. But yeah, if you dig into the code base, you see that.
Is it easier to use OS query now? I mean, I see Alistair's posts, and anybody that posts OS query queries, it's like a work of art. Like how did the string of words and sentences and DB queries become a usable intelligence gathering mechanism? I know the first version of Central, it was just like, here, put your query in this box. Well, the problem was, what query do I put in? I know that you probably changed that in later versions of Central, but it's not a Central criticism. It's a OS query problem. Like, how do you get into it? How do you find what to do? And the OS query packs help that. But yeah, I it's always with some shock and awe that I look at other people posting their queries of useful things, like Alistair's recent one where he was like, here's some useful bits I've teased out of this thing by chaining these 10,000 items together in a query. I was like, how did he get there? What led to this point in Alistair's life where he strung this query together and managed to make it work? It was art. It's artwork.
I'm in a dark place.
You're in a dark place. Yeah.
But I think that's an important point here, is that when the people, whatever, if they start Fleet or if they start Central or whatever project, they have the expectation that it should be immediately giving them something. But especially with OS query, it's what you're trying to get as an information, and you have to think about this first. And just having a server that can distribute the query and this solve a part of the overall problem, but it's more about like what you're aiming for. And so sometimes, when interacting with people that ask questions about, how is this working in Central, I have the feeling that they have not researched towards that end too much. They know there's the packs, and then they have the expectation, okay, where's the library? Where's the presets? But yeah, so it's like if you have the analogy of having a synthesizer, when Yamaha was big in presenting the DX7, so it was all the presets, but it had this programming logic built in on an algorithmic basis. But to make sound design, you really have to understand this, and then you stopped using presets, but with a tool like OS query. So yeah, you have the tables, you have the items you can query from, but then it's about you and your team coming up with this art, let's say, of assembling it in the right way. And there's libraries, but it's I have not seen. I would say Collide and maybe also Fleet have leveraged this the most, to lower this barrier. But still, I see that recently in Fleet, some features are implemented that could be considered essential, but now they have this base of usage where they address these problems that other solutions may address in the very beginning. So this also shows that there's a lot of more potential in productizing that. On the other hand, if you consider the business model I see from Fleet, they are doing great work. But still, so what is the customer base? Are they willing to pay what they ask for? Or is they just like, do they want to have this everything for free and give me the presets as well and stuff it all in the back and make it a great solution? I don't think this will work on the user side. So, but
yeah, one of the problems with presets is that, if you just want 10 specific facts, then you can write a Python script to give them to you. Like, there's not, like, O2 is a very difficult tool because it allows you to then be very flexible with the questions you're asking. But, if all you really want is like the inventory data from your devices, then there are solutions that are much easier than O2. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I see O2 the same way as I see shortcuts for iOS. Like, you need to learn the building blocks in order for it to be useful to you specifically. You can always go and like find out what other people are doing and copy paste it or like import it into your config, but that's not necessarily going to be useful, in your environment. It'll be marginally useful as opposed to like being a very powerful tool. So
the conversation we had was yet another hub, right? We're going to do a query hub, right? And like every product comes along and it's like, now we're going to have a hub, and now the community is going to come together and we're going to solve all the problems. The problems are not solvable in packs and queries. The problems are solvable, and the real power, the real turning of the corner of it is in the tables. It's in the extensions. Being able to say, I'm going to synthesize things. I'm going to be able to query the things that other tools don't have access to, or are certainly not going to be as efficient when you're going to try to get 10,000 responses over a period of time in the future. The other thing that's like an important conversation around, okay, I'm going to use this, like what value am I trying to achieve? What am I going to try to get back? We could drop the buzzword SIEM, right? SIEM, and say like, oh, security wants it all. Like, I know someone on this call who was like, yes, I would like all of the threads in the haystack. Thank you very much. I'd like them all to come back right now. I'll deal with them. Trust me, I'm going to retain these things and get actual value out of them. I don't know about that. There's a gentleman who I believe his name is Jacob, directionless. I might be having both of his names wrong, both his real and his virtual name online wrong. But he said you pay for everything. Everything has a cost. The more that you want to index, the more that you want to inventory, the more you're going to get. O2 can DDoS you real good. You can get a good amount of data back from all of these things, and they will all talk really efficiently at you. You should be thinking about what's actually delivering you the value, and not just say, well, Zentral's a SIEM. It's a great thing. They don't build themselves as a SIEM. They build themselves as an event hub, because you can ask as little as you need, and you can dispatch that data someplace else if you would like. That's more of the like practical, it can fit into lots of places. That's more of this is a really different and valuable tool. It's that you can get lots of different sources aggregated on the primary key of serial number, and therefore you can use all of the tools for their best purpose. But you're also able to get a lot of data and do something with it, where if you want to dispatch it out to Splunk, let them get the things that they really think they need. And you can, in your elk stack, look through and actually graph. You can push things out to Grafana. You can visualize all that stuff where it's delivering you value because you asked as few questions as you really needed the answer to. You can actually then manage it at scale.
Yeah, and
I'm a big booster of the tool, you might imagine.
And also, let me just remind you that from this point forward, all analogies must be made to audio engineering.
Okay.
No analogies that don't relate to synthesizers or audio equipment. So.
All right, that's a challenge. But I think Alistair captured one thing pretty well here. Is also that one of the idea that is that we have that it's a very modular setup. So, and if the need is that in one team wants to see the data, and they are not allowed to attach Splunk, but IT or the security wants to have the data in Splunk, we can ship that data not to one but to many primary data stores. And this, of course, is always a little work in progress, because we can kick off those systems, but we need to have the feedback. Okay, can you please do this and that for that data store? So we learn from the customer needs there and from the people who actually use that. And this again is something that you see in the open source commits that manifest there. And so as we're like, I remember that I had a presentation in Germany, and a nice gentleman was there, and so in the Q&A he said, like, yeah, it's like you throw a bunch of things like on the table and say, from this you can build a car, but so I wanna sit into the car and start to drive. And it's like, yeah, well, it's always the expectations. So we're not a car dealer. And we're not we're more like the modular synthesizer, to go back to that analogy. And so there's a lot of excitement, but there's also the work to find the fitting module that you want, and you can enable additional modules that are not by default in the Central all-in-one, but you can also disable modules that you don't need. So, and of course, as it's built on Django, you always have to consider, if you add something new to it, you have to run a database migration. But once this is done, you can get the comfort of even sending, let's say, events not from Santa, not from OSQuery, but also from other sensors, and get them into Central.
Cool. Do you have a roadmap, or you just sort of like maintain things until a new idea pops up and like, oh, we'll implement this? Or how do feature requests or new features work their way into Central?
So we definitely have a roadmap, and so we're just two people working on the project. So it's I would say this is also part of the roadmap to extend our team. That is something that, right now it's not the time to find the people just on the next corner. There's no meetups, and hiring internationally is also, well, it's possible, but you have to consider much more things. And but yeah, we're definitely hiring one or two people in the next months. And I would say everything that is also coming up in the way of how Apple is changing MDM. I would think the declarative, once it comes to the Mac, will solve many things, but it may not solve everything. So there will be still the need for extra tools and extra workflows. And I think on our roadmap, what we showed, especially with the overhauled Santa and the overhauled OSQuery module, is that we having that configuration and code. This is what we're aiming for. We're not the shiny, nice GUI workflow that may be having a lower priority. So giving the people more the capability to run their own automation. And one good example, in if you go for Santa, for example, if you see Upvote, they have built in the voting capability. And of course, we considered, oh, should we build this in? But Santa already has the capability to call a URL and put in some data. And it's much more easy to say, okay, use a Google form or use another custom mechanism for that to get the vote or get the request from the end user, process that, put this into your whatever processing pipeline, automate that, and then bring it back into Central because we have the capability to do so. So the caveat, of course, is it's not like a one-click solution. On the other hand, if we should spend considerable amount of time on the user experience, that may, the needs, the requirements may be so different. How should we address this? And therefore, our decision is very often more defensive and not do a full feature and focus on what is the essential need and also what is possible for the people who need to scale this across global distributed teams, and also not running a fleet of 1,000 megs, but running a fleet of more than 1,000 megs, a couple of thousand or 10,000 megs. They also have different workflows, and they may not want to look at another GUI because they are looking at so many GUIs. So if we can stay out of the way and be still a very vital component in the workflow, I think that's our goal.
Yeah, that's a great approach. And you started off when I was asking about the roadmap. You talked about hiring. That's always exciting. So, congrats. That's a big milestone.
Yeah, but so we're very self-organized. And I think this has to be first a personal fit, and also the skill set has to fit. So, and we don't look for having that office where everybody's getting together and having a painted wall and the lounge area and the kicker. So that's not us. So
yeah, well, makes sense. Marketing, you kind of touched on that a little bit, but how do you think most people find out about Zentral and then about your services?
Good question. I think.
What's the road to becoming a customer of Zentral Pro services?
So I would say we are around enough, and we have been, referred to in several presentations over the years, so that the people may have heard of us, maybe not. And so sometimes they just do some Googling and find our website, and then we just get the cold call, email. So we're looking for services, and we start a conversation from that. Then, of course, Slack. The Slack conversation is always, a head start for that. And then there are some people just like on GitHub, just interacting with us on that level. I would say that's the core pillars we're available. So I don't see myself paying for Google ads.
Makes sense. And then I was thinking earlier about you saying you're doing this this Jamf integration work. How often is there an overlap at a customer site where they're a Jamf customer and the work is also integrating with Jamf versus you're doing Zentral work, purely, and they don't have Jamf?
Yeah, but they need to have an MDM nowadays, and we're not trying to replace their MDM they have.
Well, there are other MDMs.
Yeah. So we're complementing the existing MDM. So we have a simple MDM. We had an early integration with that to upload packages. Now, since simple MDM has matured and built in Monkey, so there's no need for that kind of integration anymore. But it solved the problem for some people back then. And Yeah, right now I'm in a project where I have the first exposure with mobile iron, which is like, what? So I don't know how mobile iron works, but it's also interesting to see, other MDMs that I don't know that much. And but back to the question, I think the complementary part is always the key. So
yeah, I guess I'm asking how often, even percentage-wise, you're seeing Jamf or integrating with Jamf, and because that's where you have your expertise.
Yeah, but that's my personal expertise. I think Eric, my company partner, he's more into, okay, he understands what Jamf is, but he's not aiming for running a jumpstart or that stuff. And I would say at least half of our customers have Jamf historically. But sometimes we get into the loop because there was an initial Jamf engagement back years ago, and then the people just like reach out and just like, okay, now we have that, we mature to a level that we need your services again. We're looking into do a binary blocking, and this happened because to be frankly here, when we started with the whole idea of like, how can we get OS query managed next to Jamf? This is more than 6 years ago. And so the organization that we had this use case for, they needed years to come to that level to say, okay, now we're going for implementing OS query. Now they run Fleet, but so it was like more than 4.5 years in between. And so this shows that sometimes when you're present with an idea, doesn't mean that especially in large organizations, that they can simply implement it. They have to deal with other problems first. And I do know there's very opinionated people also in this call who are steering it in a way they can in their organization. But in other organizations, it's not possible to just like say, okay, we dump this tool, we just go for another one. And quite often what we see is that, and this is rising, that there's the people that use Azure and Intune, and where the organizations have migrated the iOS devices already. Now they're getting into this, okay, we're looking into managing the Mac's MDM side as well with Intune or Endpoint Manager. But there's so much that is missing. And this is some discussions that have started within the last year, I would say, with some people.
Yeah, it's all good points. Any other Zentral questions?
I have one. It's a little bit out of left field, but I remember a few years ago, somebody copied Zentral since it was open source and started selling a commercial product. I'm wondering, has that experience changed how you guys do development? Like, do you do less open source now, or has that pretty much not affected you guys? What's your lesson learned from that experience, I guess?
Yeah, good question. So I think the lesson learned is, of course, I was not happy about to make this discovery, and he even called the product quite closely in the, is it called phonetics, to Central, and it's like, this was odd. And of course, he has to sell a SaaS, so it's looking more shiny. He may have customers, I don't know. I think he's still a one-man show. So in this regards, well, he has his chunk off, and he copied some ideas, but our code is open source, so it's possible to do that. And but the looking at it and say, okay, this is whatever, this is the core, and we put it under a different license, or all those ideas that come to your mind are useless in the end, because it's wasted energy, right? So and in this regards, yeah, so there's some complexity in understanding the whole project. So, and if someone is spending the amount of time of doing that, I would be much more happy if they contribute. But if they just go and steal it, all right, and so then this is life. This happens. Right? And yeah, so
it happens to closed source apps too. I mean, Patrick was telling me that he discovered some company had taken his apps and just like, disassembled them or reverse engineered them or just copied them completely and was using them. And so he said making his apps open source wasn't going to change what people were already doing. But yeah, it's always nice when people contribute. But
and it's the same, I think, with the stack we choose. So we live on the capability of using open source as well, because without that we couldn't build even what we have. So, but yeah, I would say the bar of just like taking a piece of it and marketing that is quite high. And if someone managed that, well, so what could we do? They may be at the other side of the planet, and I think there's more important problems to tackle in real life, to be angry each day and try to use the internet for evil things. I don't have time for that.
Was it Sam? Was it Sam that did that?
No.
That's a great attitude, because the crappy reality is there will always be people who are trying to scam or pull one over or make a quick buck or put themselves in a position of power when they clearly shouldn't have one, or whatever. And yeah, you can either let it sort of tear you down or you can move on. So,
I mean, I've run into clients. I met a new client, and they had a book of documentation that some other, consultant had just copied from like my documentation from other clients, and just like literally reprinted it and gave it to them and said, "Here's your documentation on your project," and it has like IP addresses that are only used at this one other. So I was reading this thing. I was like, "This is awesome. This is all mine." But what are you gonna do? It's like people will take stuff and.
Yeah.
And I think also one important thing is that, especially when I say customers, it's also important that they spend considerable time. Of course, their company's paying it, but they spend considerable time of giving us feedback and giving us a good lead. What is the problem they want to solve? Because we have to understand this. And I think this is also a big part of the Central Pro services, that we are available for the research part, but we are also having to transform what we learn on a problem or on a scenario and try to come up with a good way of doing that. And it's so important what the people we work with are giving to us. So this is also a very, very big value. And yeah, so I'm really enjoying that.
All right. Any other last Central questions?
Where do you see Central really helping with Santa? Do people make mistakes using Central and Santa, or is it just like smooth sailing? Or we talked a lot about OS Query, but
I still think that many fear of switching to lockdown mode. And the journey towards that is always very individual. On the other hand, Santa has, since the beginning, has built in everything you need for that. And yeah, but very often I see that it's too complex and maybe considered too risky to block out people. But yeah, I think over time, more will go to that mode. Yeah, I would say most are using not the full potential that we have built into our Santa management, because you can run several Santa configurations in parallel, which is a big thing. and so you're flexible to organize your rules and the policies across those configurations, and this is a lot of power you have. And even going into that, I describe it as, it's more like you have the option to have a panic switch mode, where you just like go back to the only allow the essentials, and then lift off granularly back to what is needed. And as this is just, let's say, an API call away, so I would hope that more people have the time to work with that in their environments when they use it. On the other hand, the last 1.5 years have been like tiresome for all of us, and everything has changed. So I think there's, other problems to solve as well. Then, organizing your Santa rules is, needs some focus, and then doing experimental stuff on top. Yeah, maybe not now, but maybe in some future.
All right. Well, thank you, Henry. That was great. I definitely picked up a lot from there that I didn't know about all the services you offer and how much you do. And thank you for keeping the core product open source, because I think it's a tremendous contribution to the MacAdmin community. And like I think we've pointed out a few times, that there aren't a lot of other choices in some cases. So yeah, I think it's a great product, and thanks for everyone who has contributed and helped shape the product as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Can I do what I do at conferences, which is not ask a question?
Of course.
I'm sorry. I apologize in advance. Henry is in an unenviable place because he's trying to engage all these customers and be an outward-facing R&D wing, and Eric's brain makes the earth dark. I would be very, very pressured all of the time if I worked with Graham Gilbert, for example. That would be very difficult for me because his brain makes the earth dark. And I just think that one of the things that is under announced or under magnified about Zentrale is that they do these engagements where components are being changed or added to the product, and then they can't revisit it because they don't have a practical reason to go back to that code base. And they revisit it 4 years later, and they can just build on the platform because Eric's brain makes the earth dark. And it's just amazing that how long did it take declarative MDM as a concept to make its way back into that module? Django's design is pretty good in that respect, but the fact that the proof is in the pudding, the proof in the pudding is in the eating. It just fell onto the product in no time at all whatsoever. And something I've had some interactions with Eric, a few, for a period of time, let's say, and he iterates very, very quickly on these things, but he also rejects poor designs rather vehemently. And you can kind of tell that the fact that he can pick these things up, he knows that there's, okay, you want an event like Zentrale. Okay, you want an OS query tool. Okay, you want to be able to do lockdown mode. Well, then don't use Homebrew. The dirty secret is that people are allowing directories to have just about anything goes, and that's the real secret. The dirty secret of OS query is that you're going to DDoS yourself, and you're not going to use all that data. The dirty secret about a Jamf integration is, do you really want receipts with no versions in them? Well, then Jamf can give you that. Isn't that great? Is it great that you hook that up? There's all the practicality of Eric has kept the product so trim in the modules, and it's always ready for. I have to bring some Eric into this meeting. I'm sorry, because he doesn't really interact with all that often with the community. There's very conference-ready features in Zentrale. You can DDoS yourself. You can fill up your Elastic stacks. If you want to, you can. you should be concentrating on the value that you get. You should be concentrating on the practical application that's actually going to deliver value for your organization. But he's got such a great, tight design to it that there's things that I can think of that are on the roadmap. There's things that I can think of that would be very compelling. Right now, the GitOps workflow, Victor told me, there's no way in hell that you can have a GUI and Git next to each other. There's no way in hell that you can have those iterate in concert at scale with teams trying to collaborate them on that. And Central can do that now. It's not just Fleet that has RBAC. Central has RBAC. Like, there are many compelling things that it makes me kind of the mole in this conversation that, like, why does that guy know so much about it? There's a lot of compelling stuff in Central, and kudos to Henry for continuing the stewardship / constantly bringing the innovative things that he sees out in the world back to the product. But then the product also it can respond when the world changes.
We're all compelled. Cool. So leaving Zentral, the other question I wanted to ask of the group is, and this might be a very quick conversation, how has your Monterey beta testing been going? And yeah, I see a thumbs up already. Like, I think I installed it on the main machine, and like I don't even know the difference. So that's made me very, very, very happy.
My only problem has been with the iCloud private relay. It's been less than stable in the past couple of weeks. But
my problem with Monterey beta is that I've been asking Apple to implement certain things for, well over a year, and they're still not there. So it's like Monterey didn't break anything, which is good, but it also didn't really deliver anything that I really wanted. So
fair enough, but
we still really want security keys to work and
yes.
authenticated DEP. That'd be nice.
That would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
But unlike some other betas, this has been fairly non-eventful, which is super nice. I think we definitely need a release that is low drama.
Yeah,
I've got an iMac coming to test it on, because we should all give our employees iMacs, right? Now that they're all remote, right?
Of course.
It'll suspend itself, and then you can just carry it from room to room.
As far as I know, the only people who are remote are the execs. Everybody else is coming back to the office. But
all right. Well, if there's no Monterey drama, I think that's good news. And
yeah, I had issues with Tailscale briefly, but they have a new version. So
yeah,
WireGuard, yay.
Yeah, I can't even think of anything significant that broke when I upgraded. No, I mean, if it did, I didn't really notice, and it started working again.
Probably more things broke from M1, or just the bump was bigger there, I guess.
Yeah, I dumped it on my Intel box. I have to say, like, I'll sing the praises of the M1 again. Like, it's just magic. It's so wonderful. My, top of the line 16-inch Intel Mac, I do a video call like this, and the fans are screaming, and it's huffing and puffing with everything. And the M1 is just, it's like magic. The fans never kick in. I keep activity monitor open. All the cores are very, like, nothing gets over like 25%. So M1's lovely machine. Can't wait to see the next rev of whatever comes of that.
Yeah, I've been using Final Cut on the M1 Mac Mini, and it's been beautiful. Everything's great. Though I was following some instructions to enable a RAID and stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, disable the security or like, lower your security setting. And then one was like, yeah, disable SIP. And I'm like, it's like, that's not great. We'll talk, Christos.
There are definitely a bunch of vendors out there who, can't fix their stuff or don't want to fix their stuff, and their instructions are always, disable security settings, reboot and do this thing, and like, oh, that's not great. Yeah.
Not ideal.
Yeah. Monterey is great. I have more things that are broken on iOS 15 that are driving me nuts. Like the address bar in Safari. The autocomplete doesn't work. And I have a bunch of, I don't know, like little restaurant rewards apps or whatever that just crash on launch and all this, typical business. But the address bar not working in Safari on iOS is driving me nuts.
I have a test iOS 15 device, and I haven't seen it not work. But I will say on the Mac side, on Monterey, I cannot imagine that Safari will ship with that address bar. It is a travesty.
But hey, thankfully, I can change the default browser in iOS now to Chrome, and that works. I do.
Speaking of all your data belonging to somebody.
Yeah.
The one thing about Monterey that I've been testing that's really nice is the erase all contents and settings. It's still a little bit buggy, but Apple's been fixing it throughout the betas, and it's almost perfect for wanting to do Macs in a rack. It'll erase the device and then let you set it up again in a matter of like minutes. The only problem with it is that it goes through an activation step, and there's a reboot button that a human has to click, and it's like if the Mac's on the network and it activated, then just reboot. Like if Apple could solve that one little thing, then we could reprovision hardware in a CI environment without having to do anything special, and it would be quite amazing. So
next thing you'll be asking for is some way to say boot from a network, something like a net boot environment. Well, would be crazy.
What I would be asking is for custom containers where not just Apple gets to say this is a secure read-only system container, but we could do those as well.
Yeah, that would be super nice if we could create volumes that only we have the keys to for updating. That would be great.
And has anyone used because I haven't followed track the last 2 weeks, the new hypervisor capability? I think there's some projects out there that works toward that. Anyone used that already?
I haven't used so
on Apple Silicon.
Right, on Apple Silicon, you can virtualize Linux. Supposedly, there's a project out there that will let you virtualize Mac OS on Mac, which would be great. But I don't think it has reached. At least this hasn't reached parallels in VMware and the big vendors, as far as I know. But waiting for that day, unless someone else has other information that I am out of date on. I will take your silence as no. All right, we've been going at this for a little over an hour, so I think it's a great time to wrap up. We always wrap up with conferences and events. What's coming up? I think we're like 2/3 of the way. I haven't really been keeping track, but we're like 2/3 of the way through Penn State's campfire sessions, right? I think we have a Thursday or two of those left, maybe. Maybe I've missed them all. I don't know. I watched 1 or 2 of them. They're quite good. And then what's after that? Where are we? We have, I think we spoke about this last time with Patrick Wardle saying he's going to do Objective by the Sea in person. And I maintain my position from last time is I'm not ready to hop on a plane yet. But more power to him and anyone else willing to attend that in person. So that's coming up. And Max Sysadmin online again, announced October. So that's coming up. That's always a good event.
JNOC is happening.
JNOC. This might be the first JNOC I attend, or at least I pay attention to, because I finally have some Jamf in my life. So I'll probably pay attention to that. That's true, yeah, JNOC. I think that would probably round out the year. MacAduck was threatening to do something live at the end of the year, and I think they got feedback that said, no, push it off. So I think they announced a 2022 date, March.
Our conference is going to be in person in 2022.
That's a great question. That's a great question. That's going to lead us down a whole road of talking about COVID and politics and policy.
If we don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. I like that.
It's. I don't want to. I'm not saying that. It's just. It's so frustrating, and
Yeah.
might have been a topic we touched on just before you joined. That it's amazing, particularly in the U.S., that we have this amazing distribution of free vaccine, yet we can't get everyone vaccinated, and the Delta variant is now sort of the dominant variant in the U.S., and we're seeing cases spike in every state. So it's
In-person conferences are dead, says the Mac DevOps organizer. But me and Sam will be hanging out in a bar next June, so in Vancouver. So
Yeah, we'll be in the basement of the Alibi Room. Like
maybe Graham Gilbert will be invited, but
as long as the border's open, we'll show up, and there's room for like 20 people down there. It'll be good.
Yeah.
I don't think in-person conferences are dead. I sure hope not, because I
see you, Ed. I see you. It's as close as I want you to get.
Vancouver's the one that I want in person the most.
Yeah.
I heard that the Pi Cascades conference or Python conference or one of those, they were going to do like online, but just have local gatherings. So local listening or watching parties, just like local meetup groups meeting, or that's an interesting take on it. Keep it online, but keep the element of, for those that don't have to travel very far, just keep them as local gatherings. I don't know. That's an idea, but I find it very stressful as a person who organizes a conference, even more than you.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. But I don't think in-person conferences are dead. I just think it's going to take longer than we expected to kind of get back. Like, really think about it. Like in 2020, the pandemic hit, and before we had any information, people were like, "Oh yeah, like 2-3 weeks, everything's going to be closed. 2-3 weeks, and then by the end of the year, yeah, of course, things will be ramped up by the end of the year." And then you hit the end of the year, and everyone thought, well, 2021, everything will be back in shape by 2021. And of course, that's the case. So, unfortunately, I just think it's going to take longer than we'd all like. But it will happen. We'll get back there. I'm keeping a positive attitude.
Definitely miss everybody. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, thanks again, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Henry, for sharing everything that you shared. And see you next month.
Thank you, Ed.
It was good to see you all.